Okay, welcome everybody. We are going to cover the top 10 things you should do within OpenAir. So here was our thinking on this. As consultants focused on helping customers get the most out of OpenAir, one of the common things that we run up against is that kind of awful discovery that, wow, there's something that I could have been doing this whole time that I wasn't aware of. You're the first person who told me about it. It's something we run into almost every week, unfortunately. So we kind of got together and came up with a list of the top 10 things that people discover we think maybe too late. So that's what we're going to do here. If you're using most of these, great. Hopefully there's something in here that you're not taking advantage of that would be beneficial. And let's jump right in. Actually, before we do that, a couple quick announcements. We have reporting workshops coming up October and November. These are 2-day face-to-face workshops where you get good personal interaction, not only with other people, but also with Jody from TopStep, all about reports. So we take you from the report basics of how to think about them, and then actually drill down into really advanced reports using your own system in your own environment. So please take advantage of that if you're able to. We sponsor user groups with NetSuite all around the country. So these are the ones coming up: Seattle, DC, Atlanta. So if you're not planning on attending those already, I would encourage you to do so. If you want more information on those, you can check it out on our website. And then this monthly expert webinar series, we have another one coming up October that I'm really looking forward to, and I would really encourage all of you to make it. It is all about consulting skills. So one of my colleagues is going to be delivering this, all about how to help consultants with consulting skills. Unfortunately, sometimes it can be one of those overlooked things. So we have a great approach that I think you'll get a lot out of. Okay, so why a top 10? It's just because there's so much out there. It doesn't seem like it initially. It seems like, well, OpenAir is just a project management system with time and expense and, also billing and also revenue and also resource management and, and reports. And then you start to realize the more you use the system that there's a lot to it. And because there's so much to it, it's really easy to miss things. So as you know, OpenAir had done releases every 2 months. They're moving to every 3 months now. It's really easy to be busy and overlook some of those new features, some of which require internal switches. So you have to ask for them to turn some of the new features on. And so if you miss that, you're missing out. Sometimes it's just not really getting what the feature does, how it can help you. And then there's just you don't know what you don't know, right? You've used the system the same way for so long. It's kind of hard to know that there are features that you're just simply not aware of. All right, so let's start with number 10, and these are user entity tags. So here's what they do. Think of a user record, and a user record has different properties, right? You can define what department they're in. You can define maybe the user type, different things. But as soon as you change one of those things, then the historical value is lost. So you can't really tell what department a user used to be in last year necessarily. So user entity tags are a way to address that. So you can give the property, whatever it is, a date effectiveness of whatever value you define. You can filter on these values in custom calculations and in reports. We see them used mostly for utilization reporting. So the example here is, to see people not employed during a particular time frame. There's other ways to do that. We also see them like if you have organizational structural changes, but you still want to be able to report based on previous periods org structure. You can use them that way for like historical departments. So let me jump in and show you what that looks like. So first of all, to enable this, you're going to go to Administration, and you're going to go to Optional Features. And in Optional Features, there's this checkbox, Enable User Tag Feature. So once you check that, then you have this new option under Organization called Tag Groups. So if I click on Tag Groups, I've got 3 defined in my sandbox here: location, user type, and department. And within each of these, if I click on department, for example, you can see I've got 3 departments defined: consulting, support, and operations. And so now that that's set up, I can jump into a user record. Let's pick me here. I'm Peter May today. And I go into User Entity Tag, which is a new menu option now at the top if you haven't seen that before. And you can see I've got currently, I'm in this consulting department. However, I've got historical values too. So before, I was in the support department through August 15th. So I just changed departments from support to consulting. You can also see I changed from a subcontractor to an employee at the same time. So what does that look like in reports? So I just built a quick demo report here so you can see a quick example of what this does. So here you can see for Top Step Consulting, it's just filtered to show me, but to give you an idea, in the month of August, I recorded 112 hours when I was in the consulting department, but in the same month I was also in the support department, and while I was in that department, I recorded 32 hours. So just a simple version of if you want to see historical changes represented in your report so you don't miss that. That's a great use for entity tags. All right, invoice layout options. So there's a lot available within invoice layouts. It's one of the things that people tend to overlook because when you set up the system, it sort of seemed good enough, and then you didn't have a reason to look at what other options were out there. So you end up with less potentially than what you might need to support your business. So the big thing here is if you have any kind of regional differences in organizations within your company that send out invoices, invoice layouts can really help you support that so that when your customer gets an invoice, it's very clear what subsidiary or what company is sending the invoice, so you're not stuck with just the parent company sending a single invoice. So some of the options that we really like that are overlooked a lot are terminology override. I'm going to show you all these in a second. Alternate expense formatting allows you to define just for the expenses on an invoice, have a separate invoice layout that defines how those are laid out, and you just refer to that one. Expense item grouping. So if you have lots of expense items, you might have 3 or 4 different expense items for transportation, but on the invoice, you just want to group them all and call them transportation. You can do that. And then different PDF logos based on maybe the region of the subsidiary sending out the invoice. So if you don't have, we're going to look at this, but if you don't have terminology overrides enabled already, it is an internal switch. So if you're not seeing what I'm about to show you, that's why, just request it. So I'm going to go to Invoices Settings and Invoice Layouts. And this is my default here. It's called Effort Per Week Summary. And right away, I'm going to point you to this option here, Invoice Layout for Expense Items. So that means that an invoice that has this layout is actually using this other layout just for the expenses section. So let me show you what that means. So if I just grab an invoice here, let's take a look at this one. It's using that invoice layout. So I've got one layout for services here in this top section, but then it changes, and the bottom section for expenses, this is using a completely different layout. And the layout that's defined here is actually this summary expenses layout that it's referring to. So you can have dedicated invoice layouts just for expenses and then point to them optionally on other layouts so that you get a lot of flexibility in displaying your services one way and your expenses another way. So that's a good one. Let me jump back to the slide and see what were the other ones I wanted to show you. Terminology override. So if I scroll down on the invoice layout section, once this is enabled, you see this new section here called Invoice Terminology. So just a quick example, one of the things that I've done is rather than displaying user on the invoice, that isn't necessarily the best term for your customer, right? So maybe you want to say consultant or whatever term is applicable for your business. But here, even though OpenAir considers these people users, for the purposes of this invoice, it's calling them consultant just to make it a little bit more readable. There are lots of options here. Some of them may be useful for different regions, different languages, different kind of cultural expectations on how invoices should be presented and how items should be labeled. So take a look at that. You can get a lot out of that. If you're already thinking, well, why is it consultant here on the top section, but it's user down here on the bottom section? Again, because this bottom section is a different invoice layout. It's not overriding the user terminology. So if you're overriding it in one, be sure you are consistent instead of doing this here. So something to keep in mind. And expense item grouping. This is really nice. So if I scroll up here in the invoice, it's not going to show it here because this isn't the invoice I'm using for expenses. So if I go to the summary expenses layout, I'll show you what that looks like. Here's the invoice itself. You can see that these expense items are being grouped by lodging and transit and per diem. But within these is actually more than one expense item. So let me show you that. I think this is it, summary expenses. So here you go, custom expense item groups. If I look at this, I can see that within what we're going to display on the invoice as transit, this actually includes airfare, train, and ground transit. So these are my expense items, but they're all grouped together and displayed as transit on the invoice. And you can create as many of these as you like. So what we're calling per diem in this layout is actually including business meal, internet, and parking. And to add more, you just add more rows here, and you can create however many groupings you like. So that can be nice just to clean up the invoice and make it a little bit more useful. And then the last thing is the PDF logo. So if I create a PDF of this invoice here, and I look at it, I see that this invoice just has the top step footprint. But if I grab another invoice, let me grab something with a different layout. Here's one. And then I do a PDF of this one. This has a different logo. So just imagine where if you have different subsidiaries with different brands or different logos, this is how you can support that in your invoice layouts. All right. So down to number 8, the time entry tab. This is one of my all-time favorites. I know a lot of you are using this. Some of you on the call I recognize I've actually helped you turn this on. But if you're not, let me show you what it looks like and what it's useful for. Within the timesheets module, once you enable it, it's an internal switch, you'll see this option for time entries here. It allows you to basically break through the constraint of each timesheet wrapper, if you will, and just filter on individual time entries across multiple timesheets. So this can save you time rather than running an actual report. If you just want to say, I want to see how many hours so-and-so worked either on a given project or in a given period, this can be a lot faster than running a report. So right now, I've got it filtered to see how many hours did Jeremy June work this year on a project called Metrics and Reporting. So I don't have to look at multiple timesheets, open them, close them. I can see them all right here. If I want to filter it on task, how much did Jeremy spend on reporting? I can see that here. So huge time saver potentially. Now you might be noticing there's these 2 columns here called reconciled and notes. This is a really nice add-on feature. It takes just a small amount of setup. It doesn't come automatically. But this is what it does. So let's say Jeremy is a contractor and Jeremy invoices me every month based on hours that he's worked and have been approved in OpenAir. So every time Jeremy sends me an invoice, this is where I'm going to go. I'm going to say, okay, you're invoicing me for all the hours you worked across a given period. Let's say a particular month. I'll just grab January because I know Jeremy has hours then. So if I scroll down here and I look at all of these time entries, that was a busy month for Jeremy, 247 hours. Okay? So I'm going to reconcile this against Jeremy's invoice and say, is the invoice matching what's included here in the time entries tab? It's really easy to identify, does this number match, right? If yes, then what I can do is I can mark all these time entries that I've paid Jeremy. So I just select them all here, and I click the Run in Action. And I'm going to say, yes, I've paid them, and the invoice number was 123 ABC. And it's going to mark all those time entries to show that I paid them and to show what invoice it was. So next month when Jeremy invoices me, if he tries to include time that I've already paid on a given invoice, I can see really quickly, nope, I've already paid that. Sometimes you have the opposite problem. They're not invoicing you. And you want to make sure that you pay it so you don't get late invoices. So you can see what you haven't yet paid for and maybe send a reminder. So that's how that works. Okay, number 7, Graphical Dashboard. So if you've ever been on any of our webinars or any of our training, you know that we like to talk about graphical dashboards. We're even more excited about them in the new UI because there are a lot more features that I think make these extremely useful, especially compared to the old or current UI, depending on where you are in that process. So for this, let me give you a little insight. If you haven't taken a look at what's possible yet, let me show you some of the cool new features that the new UI gives you. First of all, when you create a new dashboard chart, if I create it here, one of my favorite things about this is I get a preview based on the type of chart that I'm picking. So since I've selected this area chart, I get this little preview of here's generically what an area chart looks like. Right? If I say, well, that's not quite what I want, let me try this other one. It gives you this nice preview so you know exactly what kind of chart you're about to generate before you actually take the time to generate it. So that's a great feature right there. In terms of functionality, they really do, the setup options are all the same that they have been in the old UI in terms of you have to select a real report, you have to select the report value, the descend order, all of that stuff. However, once you run the dashboard and you're looking at it, there's a couple great improvements. So let me point out a couple things here. If this is too small, because I resized it here, notice I can't really see the labels. They're cropped on the right and the left side. All I have to do is just drag it, make it a little bit wider, not quite wide enough. Now I can see everything. Okay, so this quick resizing is really nice, just to see all the labels. You can also, let me show you this line chart here. You can zoom in within a given range. So if you're seeing lots of data on this, and it's kind of zoomed out, if you want to zoom in, you just mouse over, and you just grab the points that you want, and it zooms in to show you greater detail. And then you click this button to reset the zoom. So I love that feature. And then if you like one of these and you want to include it in a presentation, this option here allows you to export it as an image. You've got PNG, JPEG, PDF, and even a vector image. So if I just want to grab this as a JPEG, I just select that option there, download it, and then my image software doesn't like it. Let's just show you a PDF. And then you've got that document to do whatever it is that you want to do with it. So that's another great feature. It's kind of implied, just one last point that I didn't really show you here. There are additional chart types that weren't available in the old UI. This is one of them, the donut. There are a few more, and there's also, I was really happy to see an improvement in the pie chart that was previously would only show you anything that was, I think, greater than 10% of the total. Now it shows you even the little slivers of data, which is nice. Okay. All right, database export. So OpenAir, this is kind of one of the lesser known features of OpenAir that I use every week for sure, and sometimes every day. It allows you to export an entire table or multiple tables of data into Excel. So you're asking, why would you want to do that? In a lot of cases, ironically, it's actually a lot faster than reports. So if you're just reporting on a single data item, think a detail report, and it's taking a long time, or if you just want to quickly grab all the data and do all your filtering and defining and sorting in Excel, and you're kind of already doing that in Excel anyways, this can save you some time. And then also, which is what really nice, is you can see deleted records. So let me show you how that works. So when you delete a record in OpenAir, not quite all the way deleted. It's still there in the database, you just can't see it while you're logged into the system. So I'm going to go to administration here, and integration, import, export. I believe only administrators have permission to be able to do this. So this part's a little bit backwards. You have to basically, if you pick something here, you're excluding it. So you have to add everything. So this means I'm excluding everything until I want to include something. Then I have to go remove it. So let's say just the project table. Now let me do a user table. Although I guess users wouldn't be deleted. So let me just do a project. I'm going to include the audit field, and I'm going to export it. And it's just instantly available in a zip file. Super fast, just as fast as your internet speed. Now if I open this file, this is everything that's in the entire project table in the system. So one of these columns, first of all, this is way too many columns. This is more than you would want in a real report, right? However, one of these columns is deleted. So if I filter on deleted, it'll take me right away to everything that's ever been deleted. Just filter on one. One means true. These are all the projects that have been deleted. And then if I take it a step further and I go into this audit trail for a deleted project, it's a little bit kind of technical sorting through these lines, but it's not that hard once you get the hang of it. It basically, U is updated, so I can see it was updated on this date, and then the next thing it shows me is the user ID of the person who did it. So whoever has the user ID of 2 is the person who deleted this project. And this is the change here, deleted. So if you've ever been in that situation where somebody says, I swear there was something here yesterday, whether it's a booking or a project or whatever, and now it's not there anymore, this is the way you can find out if it ever was there in the first place, and if so, who was it that deleted it. So that's a nice feature, whether it's looking for deleted items or just wanting to see everything, and then, like I said, creating your own filters. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll grab this, and then I'll just kind of take a whole bunch of columns I don't care about and delete them, and then start to kind of narrow down what data do I really care about and play with it that way. So that's all there is to that. All right, number 5, form permission rules. So permission rules are part of form permissions, but if you're using form permissions already, this is kind of an extra step. So permission rules are the extra step. So form permissions, let me jump in and show you, is really kind of user role-based. So if I go to a project and I modify the form permissions, and I just want to see, let me see everything here. Modify form permissions. Now, most commonly, this top section here is what we see people using. So based on your role, if you're a user, then given fields are either required, hidden, read-only, etc. Okay, so what I'm talking about is not that section, but this section down here, which is permission rules. Okay, so this is, instead of just basing it on what role is logged in, this is conditionally basing it on a number of different factors. So here's one rule that I have that just happens to be created here, where if the start date is greater than the date completed, which is a custom field, then it's going to require notes and also display a message. So this display a message is a brand new feature from last month's release. If you're not using it, you might want to take a look at that. But it just allows you to display a color-coded message, either green, yellow, or red. It's not truly an error. It just looks like an error message because it's red. So it doesn't really stop anything. It's not true form validation, but it does allow you to display a message at the top of a screen. Another new feature is to be able to relate two fields to each other. Notice I'm comparing a start date field against a date completed field. Previous to last month's release, this wasn't possible. You could compare the start date against a fixed date that you defined, but not against another date. So that part is new, comparing two fields. And then another part that's new is limiting values. So let me jump in and show you a couple other examples where I've found that useful. So here's some ideas to kind of get you thinking about how this might be helpful, starting with a user record. Picture a user. If you have contractor users and employee users and you want to track different sets of information for each, maybe if you select a user type custom field as contractor, then you want the form to display additional contractor-specific fields, maybe the contractor company, maybe their payment terms, maybe who knows what you want to track. But you would only display those fields if the user is a contractor. Or maybe if they're an employee, you want to display their employee number or their badge ID or different things. So that's one possible use of permission rules. The second one is project specific. So if you have different project types, or if a project in a particular stage, the form should look different, like internal projects are generally simpler and don't have as many fields that you want to track on those projects. So maybe you want to hide a bunch of fields on your internal projects and keep the form nice and simple, and that would be based on project stage. Here's one that's come up recently. If the current user, meaning the person logged in, has a role of project manager, for example, and they're setting up a proxy on a user, maybe you want to only allow them to proxy as a user in the same role so they don't get elevated permissions while they're proxying. And then a last one that actually just discovered this morning, I want to show you. So some of you use the clone timesheet feature. So if I create new clone, one of the feedback items that I've gotten from people is, I'd love for people to clone timesheets, but I don't want them to accidentally leave the hours the same. Is there a way that we can force it to clear the hours? Well, now the answer is yes. So I've created a rule here. As soon as I select something here, it automatically limits my selection to clear the hours. It also displays this little message, assuming this is a new policy, saying cloning timesheets now only allows clearing hours. Let me show you how I did that. So here in the permission rules, I have this one rule that I called clone timesheet. And if I edit it, it just says if duplicate this timesheet is not blank, then limit the values of change hours to only be able to select clear the hours. Okay, that's exactly what it did. And then I'm displaying this message. I called it a warning message. All that really means is that it's yellow. If I called it an error message, it doesn't really give you an actual error that prevents anything. It just displays it in red. And this is what that would look like. So you can do this for cloning timesheets. You can also do this for cloning expense reports. Right? If you want to do that, you can do the same thing. So maybe on the receipt amounts, you want to force a clear. That's what I've done here. So maybe people do the same expense types every week, but you don't want them to keep the same amounts and you want to force them to re-enter the amounts every week. I've done the same kind of rule here on cloning expenses. So a couple of ideas. I'm sure there's lots more that we'll discover over time, but just to get you kind of thinking about what's possible. Great new feature. If you don't see that in your form permissions, it is an internal switch to enable it already. This probably only applies to customers who have used the system for a long time. I think anyone who gets the system in the last few years has it automatically on. So just keep that in mind. If you don't see it, you can just request to be enabled. All right, number 4, service line expansion. So if you're not using service, what it is it's the ability to stamp a value on transactions when they're generated. Okay, so the idea is you have a service. Let's say we have 2 services called consulting and support. And on a task, you can define if anybody works on this task, we're going to consider this task a consulting task. And then you have a rule that says either we're going to, when we bill that time, either we're going to use whatever service is defined on that task or we're going to override it and call it whatever service we want. But the bottom line is the time entries are stamped with that value based on what the task has defined. Or you may have people populated on their timesheet. There's a lot of options on how this is set up. But ultimately where you end up is transactions, meaning timesheets, time entries specifically, billing transactions, charges, and revenue recognition transactions all get stamped with this value. It's most commonly used for integration with financial systems so that as you bill, all those charges can be applied correctly to the right category. So sometimes people will say, that's great, we need that so that our integration works and we're reporting revenue or billing according to the proper income categories. However, we also have a similar need to report data in the same way, but we're already using service. So you can enable 5 additional, what OpenAir calls service lines, that work the same way as service, and you can rename them whatever you like. So you can, out of the box, turn them on, enable them on tasks, and have them work just like services. That's one way to use them. But another common way that we end up using them is not for timesheets and billing and revenue transactions, but to use it as a pick list field that allows you to activate and inactivate values. So a quick example is, let's say you want to track something like a sales rep on a project. And the value list of sales rep might change over time. So if you just did a drop-down list, custom field of sales reps, because they're not users in OpenAir, let's say, then that drop-down list is going to get huge over time as the sales team brings on more and more people. So over the years, that drop-down list might be, let's say 50 people in the drop-down, but realistically you've only got 20 currently active on the team. So using this service line expansion, you can have a service line 1, rename it sales rep, and then create a selection for each particular sales rep and mark them active or inactive. So let me show you just a quick example of what that would look like. First of all, you have to enable it, request it from OpenAir if it's not already. And one difference is instead of going to invoice settings, which is where you're going to find services, these are actually going to go to projects settings. And here I can see they've already been enabled, so I've got service 1 through 5 lines. So I'm going to take service 1 line first. This has already been set up with engineering, development, and support, so I'm not going to tread on whoever set that up. I'm going to go to the next one, and that's already set up. So I'm going to use service line 3, which isn't being used yet. And I'm going to use it for sales rep. So I'm just going to create 2 for now. I have John Smith, and we'll say Jane Doe. Now that I've got them, notice they're both active. So if John Smith is no longer with the company, I can make John inactive. Then the next thing I'm going to probably want to do is rename service line 3 to sales rep. And you do that in the terminology override. So now I've got a nice clean list of, no longer is it service 3 line, but now I can find it under sales reps here. So this is where you manage your list of sales reps. So now the question is, how do I get this onto a project, right? Because if I just grab a project here, I'm not going to see it on the project properties form. There is no sales rep here. It doesn't show up. So the last step I need to do is to create a custom field that's going to be a pick list field on the project. So I'm going to say put it on the project. Where's project? Custom field is pick list. And then the pick list value, or the list source, is sales rep. So I'll call this project sales rep, so I don't end up with the exact same name in 2 places. Something like that. Now that I've done that, now it shows up in my project. Here it is. And in my pick list, I only see the active selection, which is Jane Doe in our case because John is no longer active. So it's a way to maintain active selections in the dropdown. All right. Report folders. So a lot of you are already on report folders. That did come out a few years ago, but just in case you're not, let me show you how this works real quickly. So reports can be a mess to organize if you're anything like us. These are just the reports that I own just in a sandbox that started out blank, actually. So if I looked at all reports, it would be even worse. So this one only has 104. I know a lot of you have many, many hundreds of reports, and some of you even thousands. So how do we kind of get a handle on organizing these and making sense of these? Report folders are a big help. So now that I'm in my reports, I see this option here on the left under Action, this report folder icon. It allows me to take an existing report and throw it in a folder. You can see these 2 here are in this Dashboard Reports folder because they're indented. Okay, if I wanted to put something else in this folder, all I would do is just find the report. I'll use this audit trail one. I'll click the report icon, and I'm going to say just put it in the Dashboard Reports folder. And then when it refreshes, here it is. Okay, there's a lot more you can do with this, though. You can have folders within folders. You can also share folders with groups of people. So on this row here, I'm in this Booking Reports folder. If I wanted to share everything that's in that folder with a group of people, or more likely, even better, an assignment group, I can do it that way. So automatically, when I put a new report in this Booking Reports folder, everyone in this assignment group is going to have access to see that in their shared reports link. You can also have a report in multiple folders. So maybe you have this report that would be both in the Dashboard Reports folder and the Booking Reports folder. I just select it here, and I click File Multiple Reports here, and I can say copy to the Booking Reports. Now it exists in both places. Oops, I need to do it again. So now it's in the Booking Reports, Time Report A. If I do it again and I copy it to the Dashboard Reports, now it'll be in both folders. So here we go, Time Report A, Time Report A. Now I own Time Report A, so if I modify it and save it, that save is going to be reflected in both folders, regardless of how users are accessing it. It's one report, it's just accessible in 2 different places. So if you're not using this yet, highly encourage you to enable that and start organizing reports. All right, almost to number 1, but number 2 first, accounting dates and periods. So these can be really important if you want to report data accurately and you want to reconcile it against accounting systems. Okay, so the idea is any transactions that we create, let's just use revenue for an example. It's the most commonly used piece of this. Let's say that right now our current open accounting period is September. So any transactions I create right now are going to be stamped with not only a transaction date, but also an accounting date of September. Now let's say September is over, but here we are in October, and it's October 4th, and I'm still running revenue for data that occurred in September. Well, if I don't use accounting dates, let's say I have a % complete revenue recognition rule. If I generate that, run that rule and generate the transaction in October, it's going to stamp it with October 4th. So if I ran a report and said, show me the dates, revenue by month, that revenue is going to show up in October, even though it really was intended to show for September. So accounting dates allow you to reconcile that. So even if you're generating it in October, it will be stamped with an accounting date of September. So all your September revenue can reconcile against what your accounting system considers September revenue. So let me show you what this looks like real briefly here. First of all, if you don't have it enabled, this is an internal switch. Just request that OpenAir enable that for you. And let me show you what the setup options are for that, just real briefly here. So once it's enabled, you'll see some new options here under Administration, Organization. I have two new menu items. I have Accounting Dates and Accounting Periods. Accounting Periods is first where you define what your accounting periods are and what date ranges they include. So this just shows for 2013, the current accounting period is September. I can see it's current here. And if I click into this, I had to create this at one point. What I'm saying is that any dates between September 1st and September 30th, I'm considering part of the September accounting period. The reason you have to define this is because you may not use calendar dates for accounting periods, so it gives you that flexibility. Okay? So once you build all these out, now the question is, well, how do I define which transactions inherit which accounting date? So there's two places where you define that, and it depends on how those transactions are generated. Some transactions are generated that go through an approval process, and that's where you modify those here. So timesheets, expenses, and invoices all go through an approval process, so you define them here. For example, if you wanted to apply an accounting period to a timesheet itself, you don't have to, but if you wanted to, this is where you would define it. So based on the event of the timesheet being created, submitted, or approved, in this case when it's submitted, we're going to say at that moment, write the accounting date based on the current accounting period at the time it's submitted. Okay, so this takes a little bit of thought to go through and consider, do I really need accounting dates on all these types of records? If I do, when should it be defined? How should it be defined? It takes a little bit of thought, but it's worthwhile. So this is one place that you're going to do that. The other place is in the rules themselves. So billing rules and recognition rules. If I jump into a project and I just go, let me find an active one, that would help. So in the rule itself, it's going to allow you, you're going to have this new section in rules of how should I apply the counting date. And almost always you're going to say whatever the current accounting period happens to be, that's the one we'll stamp it with. So in my example earlier, if we're in October but we're generating revenue for time that was really, we should consider September revenue, then we're going to say current accounting period. Okay? The other thing that's a nice option with this is if you have multiple subsidiaries or multiple companies, regions that operate under different accounting periods, and one company or one subsidiary wants to close their accounting period but the other isn't ready, you can actually manage multiple sets of accounting periods. So it's not displayed here. I don't have it enabled in the sandbox, but the idea is you can have the current open accounting period for one subsidiary and a separate one open for the other subsidiary and so forth. So it certainly can support that. And the number one recommended feature is custom calculations. So why are we putting this in the top 10? A lot of you know about these already. OpenAir continues to enhance these features and make them more and more flexible and give you more and more power. In fact, just this last release, there was an additional enhancement that improved on the date range filtering option, which I think is becoming really powerful. I'm looking forward to them expanding that into bookings, which isn't quite there yet, but I'm optimistic. So let me show you just a quick example of how powerful this can be. The problem with talking about custom calculations is it's so flexible and there's so many different ways that you can use them. It's hard to know where to begin. So I'm just going to show you one example that perhaps you haven't considered. Okay? So what I've done is I've created these three down here, if you see my screen at the bottom, these three custom calculations, and I'll call them revenue last quarter, revenue this quarter, revenue last month. If I just open one of these up, you'll see how I built it. In the meantime, while that's loading, they tend to be a little slow, I'm going to show you an example of what that looks like in a report. Get that report going. So here's the custom calculation. It's just recognized revenue times 1. So it's just revenue. It's not really being multiplied or added to anything. And it's not filtered on anything, but if I scroll down, there's this section here, date filters for recognition transactions. So what this means is it's only going to show me data where the recognition transaction date is last quarter. So as long as my report spans last quarter or more, this will show me data. So the trick is the report range itself has to be bigger than the custom calculation date range. So here's what this report looks like. So I'm reporting for all of 2013. And here I can see this is just the standard field recognized revenue. So this is essentially revenue to date or year to date. And then in the separate column, I get a breakdown of that. How much of that was from last quarter, how much of it was from this quarter, and how much of it is from this month. Okay, so the only way that this is possible, let me reiterate this, is the report width, if you will, the date range, has to encompass the defined date ranges within each custom calculation. As long as you do that, this works great. So you can filter on not only revenue recognition dates, the new option that came out last release is this time entry date here. So if you wanted to filter on particular time entry dates, maybe for the current week or for the last month or whatever the case may be, you can do the same thing in your custom calculations that relate to time entry values. So it's still not quite everything that you can filter on these date ranges with, but it is a growing list, and we're seeing them continue to invest in this area, which we're very happy about. So another really common use of this is if you want to be able to report on billable time and non-billable time in the same report. If you're not doing that already, this is a great way to do that. Rather than do your filtering at the report level itself, you can filter within each individual value, and that's what a custom calculation can do. Okay. That is it. If you are not aware of our ebooks online, you can find them at this web address on our website. We have 2 of them. Every week we publish these in the OpenAir user group on LinkedIn. So if you're not on that LinkedIn user group, please join. You can interact with not just us, but the OpenAir user community in general. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we're at TopStepTweets. And, of course, our website, topstepconsulting.com. So that concludes this webinar. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and unmute the lines for any questions.